today's video, we'll be continuing our Scripting Basics series by talking about functions. I am still in the Scripting Basics script that we've been using throughout the series and have just commented out everything in the start and update function. So we just still have all of that in front of us if we need it. And like I was saying, today's topic is functions. Now first of all, let's define what a function is. A function is a grouping of programming instructions. So for instance, we have the start function here, one of the built-in functions that runs once at the very beginning of our program. It has a return type. So if you see a void here, that means that it's not going to return any information. It's just going to run its instructions. A function has a name. A function has some parentheses. And then a function has a body, which is defined by a set of curly brackets. So it has one that starts it here, and way at the bottom of all the instructions in the start function here, we have one that closes. Everything between the starting and ending bracket for the function is part of that function. So all these commands that are in between here belong to the start function. Alright, now this is a built-in Unity function which runs automatically. We're going to talk about user-defined functions, which we can name with whatever name we want, and then we have to actually tell the computer when to do the instructions inside of that function. But basically a function is just a way to wrap a whole bunch of code together in one big block, and then to tell the computer when it's the right time to do those instructions. Okay. One of the main reasons that we use functions is for code that we want to use in multiple places in our program. So instead of typing the code 10 different times in 10 different places and having to maintain that, we can type it in one function and just call that function. Then when we need to make changes to our code, we can just change the code in one place in that function. So let's start by defining our own function. So I'm just going to go down here to the bottom of my program. Remember, this last little curly bracket here, this is the close of our class. So we have to make sure that we type above that. This one here closes the update function. So let's just make a little bit of room here so that I'm above my last bracket for the class. So I'm still inside of here. Now a function needs to be in the class, but it can't be inside of another function. So we have function start here, which goes to this one. We have update, which starts at this bracket and goes to this one. So down here now, I'm just in my class, right? It's not inside of anything else. So we start out our functions. So let's just make a note here. This is a user-defined function. Okay, and we start with the return type. Most of the time, it's going to be void. These return types just mean you want the computer to do the instructions. You're not sending any information back out of this function to somewhere else. So we're going to start with ones that are just void ones. So we say void, and then we give a name. Let's call this one print message. So print message. Naming conventions here for functions. You want to start your functions with an uppercase letter. And remember, no spaces in any kind of names inside of coding. So this is all one name. I have to not put spaces here, so I'm just capitalizing that first letter in the next word so that it's easy to read. So print message, we need a set of parentheses here. And then we need a open curly bracket. And I usually skip a few lines and then put a closing one in, so we have a little space to start typing. So this defines the body of the function. This defines all the instructions I want to have happen when print message is called upon to do its job. So I have to stay in between these two curly brackets. So I'm just going to go right here. So what I want print message to do is just send a debug.log to the console. All right, so let's just say debug.log, and let's have it say player is alive. Right, we'll just have it send that message. Okay, so just one command in this function so far, just the player is alive. Alright, now this function here is all ready to go, but it's never going to do this debug.log unless I call this function. I have to actually call this function up here and tell it to do its job. And I have to do that from somewhere in my code that's already going to be running. Okay, so we've got this all ready to go. Let's go up here and look in our update function here. Actually, let's go up into our start function here and see what we got going on. So up here, my start function, I'm just going to, I guess, stick this down here at the bottom of the start function somewhere. When I commented this out, I left these brackets here so we didn't get an error, right? So this is where the start function ends, so I'm just going to make some room up above it. And I'm going to do a function call. So this is a function call. A function call is when you want a function to do its instructions. So use this when you want a function to do its instructions or commands. Okay, so to call the function, all you have to do is say its name. So the name of my function down there was print message, and you'll notice that if you define the function correctly, you'll get it in your autocomplete here, so I can just select it from there. And then what I need to do is give it a set of parentheses, an open and close, and then a semicolon. That's all I need to call a function. So I just say its name, a set of parentheses, and a semicolon. That's a command that says tell the print message function to run its instructions. So in my program here, it sets up the variables, it hits the start function, it skips all these comments, it hits this line of code, print message. It's then going to find the print message function. It knows it exists because I already defined it. So my print message function is here. It's going to go here, and it's going to just run all the lines of code that are in between the opening and closing brackets here. When it's done with that, it'll go back up to my function call, and it'll start with the next line down. In this case, there's nothing there, so that's all it's going to do. It's just going to do it one time in the start function. Okay? So let's save this. Let's go out into Unity and see if this actually works for us. So let's hit play, and it says player is alive. Okay, we got it just one time because it's in the start function. So that actually worked the way we expected. So again, we called the function here. We said, hey, print message, do your deal, do your job. Print message, we defined it here so the computer knows what it is, and it said exactly what it was supposed to say. So that is a simple user-defined function. We set up the function here by giving it a return type, a name, a set of parentheses, and then open and close curly bracket to put its body in, its instructions in, and we gave it an instruction to run. Okay? Now, what makes this more useful to us is that we can actually send information to functions. And when we send information to functions, that's called sending an argument. So an argument is a required piece of information a function needs to run. So let's say that we don't always want to print this message. Let's say that we want to debug.log something, but we actually want to have this message changed, and we want to be able to send the actual text we want to display to the print message function, and then have it send that information to our console. Okay, so I need to set up an argument. To do that, you go into the function definition here, and in the parentheses, you tell it what kind of information you want to store. So we have to set up a variable right inside of our function definition here, so in the parentheses. So I want a string, so I give the type of information that I want to send, or that I want to receive here, and then I have to give it a variable name to store it under. So let's just call this message. All right, this will make a private function level variable here. So this variable message, it's only going to be active or known about inside of print message. So nowhere else in my script will I be able to get access to message. It's just a temporary kind of storage place. And then instead of debug logging this, let's debug log our string variable, like this. Okay? So we're going to be sending the string, the text to the console is going to be whatever message is, okay? So now that we've changed this, we have to, when we call this function, we are now going to be required to send it some text. So let's go up here to where we called it. Here's where we're calling print message. Now because we're asking it to get some information, we have to send it. So let's send a message here. So we can send that as a string. So let's just say player is alive and well. Alright, this is the message I want to send to the console. So I would save this now. Alright, so again, what's going to happen now is when I call this, I'm going to send this string, this text, player is alive and well. Down here in the function, it's going to save the text I sent through those parentheses, that argument. It's going to save it in the string variable message. So that message is going to now be equal to this text. And then when we debug log it, it's going to print out the text that's contained in this string variable to our debug.log. So let's go test that out and see how this works. Alright, we'll clear out what was there before. Let's hit play, and it now says player is alive and well. Alright, so it sent that text down to print message, and print message put it in the debug.log. Okay, so now this is where functions are useful, because I can call this function multiple times from all sorts of different places in my code, and I can give it different messages to print. So maybe I do another, maybe I call it again. So I called it once, I'm going to call it again. I'm going to send it a different message now, like how are you today? Alright, so now I'm sending a new message. So the first time it gets called, it sends this message down and it prints it. Then it's going to come back up here after it's done, print message is done, it comes back and resumes where it left from. I'm going to call it again with a different message. So how are you today? Will now get stored in message here. It'll kind of overwrite what was there, and now it'll print that out. So I should get players alive and well, and then on the next line of my console I should get how are you today. So let's save it and test that out. Alright, let's clear out what's there and hit play. Okay, and see, I got the first call to it said players alive and well, and then the second call to my function caused it to print how are you today. So hopefully you're starting to see how useful this can be, because in our games there are lots of times where we maybe want to print something to a text on the screen, or maybe it's when our player takes damage. We have one function that handles damage, and we can send then any amount of damage to it, and the computer will handle and process it. So functions are very useful to us. So this is an example of a function with one argument, one piece of information. We can actually send multiple pieces of information to a function. So let's make another new function. So we start with a return type. So we'll just say void here, because we're not going to be returning any information out of this function. And then what we're going to say, let's call this build sentence. Okay, and we put our open close parentheses, we drop in our open and close curly brackets for the body of our function. Okay, so this is always the shell of your function. You just want to get that out of the way first so you don't forget to put these brackets in or something like that. Let's actually tell it now that I want to bring in let's say 3 different strings, and I want to have this function then take and combine those 3 different strings into one sentence and print that out into my debug.log. So I would say string part 1. Okay, let's do this. Let's say word 1, even though it could be multiple words. And if I want to put have more than one storage spot, get more than one piece of information, I just put a comma after this, and then I'd find the next variable, which is going to be a string, and we call this maybe word 2 and the comma, and then let's do another string and call this word 3. Okay, So now I've got a function here that requires 3 pieces of information, 3 separate strings that need to be sent to it. And then it's going to debug.log. And what I want it to debug.log is word1 plus word2 plus word3. And when you're working with strings, if you use a plus sign in between different pieces of string here, it just jams them all together. So it's going to jam all 3 of these words together and make one long word out of it. Okay? So it'll take and put that in. So let's save that. Alright, now if I go up to call this, so I've got to call it from somewhere. So let's go up here and let's now call build sentence. See, here's build sentence. Now you see, since I saved this, it knows about build sentence, and it's telling me right here in my code hints that I need to have in the parentheses a string called a string, another string, and a third string. See that? And it tells me what they'll be called down inside of the function. So I just have to give it some strings. So let's say first string is super. Okay, and then we got to put a comma to separate the next piece of information. So here's another string, duper, and then we'll put a comma, and then for the third word I need to send is I'll say do. Super duper do. Those are my 3 words here. Actually, let's make that a capital S, super. Okay. So I'm sending to build sentence 3 pieces of information. Here's string number 1, string number 2, string number 3. When I send that down here, it will capture the first piece of information into word 1, the second piece of information into word 2, and the third piece of information into word 3. So we'll have super duper do. That's how it's going to capture it. Then it's going to go ahead and debug that to my log here. So it's going to say super plus duper plus do. It's going to jam all those words together into super duper do. So let's save that. Let's go out here into Unity and let's clear out our console. Alright, so when I hit play now, it's going to still do the 2 calls to print message, but it's also going to do the last one as well. So here we go. We have print message saying players live and well. We have print message saying how are you today? And then we have build sentence that says super duper do. It jammed those 3 words together and it just printed them all as one word. Alright, so that is a function with multiple arguments. Okay, so I've showed you a function with no arguments, which was the first print message where it just printed a default message. And then I've showed you a function with just 1 argument, and here's one with multiple arguments. You can set these up to take whatever types of information you want. It doesn't always have to be the same. I could take a string, a float, an integer, and do something with all those pieces of information. When you make your function, you just have to know what purpose you're making it for, and then you send it the information that it needs to do its job. And then down here, you just tell it what to do to make it do its job. Okay? So that is functions and how to set them up, define them, and how to call them and send information to them. Now the last thing we should look at is how to return information back from a function. So so far I've just been using return type of void. So let's make another function here. And let's call this, okay, let's have, first of all we got to tell it what kind of information we're going to return. So let's return an int. So I'm going to say int. So this one's actually going to return an integer. Let's call this answer. And let's have this require some information coming in. So let's have it take an int called number 1 and an int called number 2. So two numbers are going to come in, 2 integer numbers. We'll put our body in here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say return, and then I'm going to say number 1 plus number 2. So I'm going to have the function add these two numbers together, and when I say return, that actually means return this answer. I'm going to return it. It's going to return as an integer here. Okay, so this answer is going to return an integer, and the integer it returns is the two numbers added together. So let's save that. And then when we call this, so let's go up here and call this guy now from our start function. Now this is going to be a little different because this is returning a value. Where I call answer is where it returns the value back. So up here I have to do something with the answer, right? If I just put it here, it's going to give me an error. So I'm going to do a debug.log right here. And what I want it to do is I want it to print out to me the answer, okay? So we're going to say, let's put a little message in front of this. So we'll say the answer is, not answers, the answer is, and then I can jam onto the end of that little sentence, answer. So here's my function call, and I have to send the two numbers, so let's just say 1, 1. Okay, those are my two things. And it's going to return the answer right here. So my function call, answer, and the two numbers will actually get replaced by the integer. So that's because this function now returns a value. So it's actually going to return an answer, an integer. As I set it up right here, I told it, hey, return an integer, take in, it's called answer, let's take in these two numbers, and then we're going to return these two. Okay, so it's going to return through this little integer here, right to here. Okay, so when you return a value, your function call actually kind of becomes like a variable in some ways. It's going to get replaced by whatever you return to it. So now I can say the answer is, and then I'll just get the number here. So 1 plus 1 should be 2. So let's put a semicolon at the end there so we don't have a error. Let's save this. Let's go see if this works out here. Make sure I don't have any errors. All right, let's clear our console. So let's hit play. Okay, so I've got my two print message. Here's my build sentence, and look here, this says the answer is 2. All right, so it printed that. That's because, again, when I called this function, because it returns a value, it's not a void, it's an integer, it's going to return an integer right here to where it was called. So this actually gets replaced with the answer, with the integer. That's because I told it you're going to return an integer. Here's the name of my function. Here's my arguments, my two pieces of information. I'm doing the math here, and I'm returning that answer to the math through this integer function answer to here. Okay, so I could send a different number now. Maybe I want to send 5 and 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. So if I save this and run this now, I should get an 8. So let's clear out the console. Let's hit play. And this time, right here, it says the answer is 8. All right, so this is a little bit more advanced of an idea here. This is a little bit confusing. Functions in general can be kind of confusing at first, but they're very, very useful. So I've given you a couple of different types, okay? So let's put maybe a note in here. So the information in the parentheses here are arguments, okay? And then they're just like little temporary variables, okay? And let's do void is the return type. Okay, void is the return type. If you don't want to return any information, okay, and this is probably the most common type, the void type. All right, down here, int is the return type to send back an integer to the function call. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, how that works. And you've seen 3 different uses of functions, and they're kind of the 3 most common ones. Again, I can have this return type be any variable type that I want, and again, these functions are just all user defined, so they're going to be different in every program that you write. But hopefully you've got the concept here now, how to define a function, how to use arguments to send information to a function, how to use a return with a return type to send information back out of a function. Okay, so a lot to take in this video. You may have to look at this a couple of times before it starts to make sense, and do some practice on this. And if you have any questions, of course, as always, make sure you ask me. And hopefully this made sense to you and you found it useful. Thanks for watching.